For over 70 years, the United States and Israel have been the closest of allies. Billions in aid, cutting-edge military technology, a partnership that shaped the Middle East. But imagine this. What if, overnight, the US and Israel became enemies? How would the world react, and could the Middle East survive the fallout? Today, we dive into one of the most shocking scenarios possible: the collapse of America's alliance with Israel. This isn't just about two countries disagreeing. This would rewrite global politics, shift power balances, and spark tensions across the Middle East and beyond. In this video, we'll explore step by step what might happen if Washington and Tel Aviv turned from allies to rivals. And the ending? It might just reveal how fragile the world order really is. Right now, the US-Israel alliance is one of the strongest partnerships in modern history. Since Israel's founding in 1948, America has provided political protection, billions in military aid, and advanced technology that turned Israel into the region's dominant power. The US sends over $3.8 billion in military aid every year. Israeli jets, tanks, and missile defense systems rely heavily on American support. Politically, the US shields Israel in the United Nations, vetoing dozens of resolutions that might otherwise isolate it. Intelligence sharing between the two countries has stopped countless terror attacks. For decades, this alliance has shaped the Middle East. Enemies of Israel, like Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, know that America stands firmly behind it. Without that protection, Israel's survival would always be in question. But what if that suddenly changed? What if, instead of shaking hands, these two nations pointed weapons at each other? Maybe it starts with a massive political betrayal. Say, a US president cutting ties after a major scandal, or Israel taking an action that shocks even Washington. In this alternate timeline, overnight, allies turn into adversaries. The very first domino to fall would be money and weapons. Billions in US aid would vanish instantly. Israeli defense industries, which rely on American funding and technology, would face a sudden crisis. American troops stationed in the region might be ordered to withdraw, leaving Israel without the military backing it has depended on for decades. The Iron Dome missile defense system, a symbol of Israel's security, could lose key US support, making the country far more vulnerable. Inside Israel, panic spreads. The public begins to question, can we survive without America? Meanwhile, in Washington, politicians argue over how to handle their former ally. Some demand sanctions. Others call for a complete break. But this is just the beginning. The shockwaves hit the region instantly. Iran celebrates like never before, calling it the collapse of the Zionist empire's shield. Tehran might even push harder on its nuclear program, calculating that without US protection, Israel is far more vulnerable. Palestinians see this as a historic turning point. For decades, American support blocked their recognition at the UN and shielded Israel from accountability. Now, for the first time, they believe global pressure could actually force Israel into concessions, or even collapse. Saudi Arabia and Gulf states face a dilemma. Many of them secretly rely on US-Israel cooperation to counter Iran. With that alliance broken, they would have to choose: side with Washington or exploit Israel's weakness. The Middle East enters a new phase of instability. But globally, the stakes rise even higher. The world's major powers move quickly. Russia sees a golden opportunity. Moscow steps in to offer weapons, intelligence, and political support to Israel, hoping to pull it into its sphere of influence. China, always hungry for new allies and technology, opens its doors to Israel, offering massive trade deals and access to global markets. But here's the problem. These new friendships aren't built on trust, only on survival. Israel would find itself torn between two worlds: the West it once relied on, and the East it never truly trusted. And in Europe? Nations are divided. Some continue to support America's new hardline stance. Others, worried about instability, call for peace and neutrality. The balance of power begins to tilt, but this is only the surface. Because while governments argue, ordinary people face a new reality, one filled with fear, uncertainty, and the shadow of war. Israel has lost its most powerful ally. Enemies across the Middle East are emboldened, and rival superpowers rush to fill the void. But the real danger isn't in the politics. It's in the battlefield. What happens when the US and Israel clash not with words, but with weapons? That's where the story truly begins. While leaders and armies play their power games, ordinary people in both nations would feel the most direct impact. In Israel, fear grips the streets. Without US protection, citizens worry about missile attacks from Hezbollah in Lebanon, rockets from Gaza, and even cyber attacks from Iran. Supermarkets see panic buying. The economy takes a nosedive as investors flee, sensing instability. Inside the United States, Jewish and pro-Israel communities feel betrayed and divided. Some protest Washington's betrayal, while others quietly shift their loyalties, realizing the relationship is gone for good. The world watches as protests erupt across the Middle East. Palestinians celebrate, demanding more international recognition. But Israelis feel increasingly isolated, surrounded, and cornered. Cliffhanger. But this isn't just about aid or politics. When alliances collapse, the battlefield always follows. This is where the crisis reaches its breaking point. Imagine the United States and Israel not just arguing, but actively working against each other. Cyber warfare. Both countries are technological powerhouses. Israel's Unit 8200, famous for its cyber operations, could clash with America's NSA. Attacks on infrastructure, power grids, communication networks, even satellites, would cripple daily life. Military confrontations. U.S. forces in the Mediterranean might be ordered to intercept Israeli operations. Israeli jets, long supplied by America, would now be turned against their former ally. The irony: both militaries know each other's tactics inside out. Arms race in the Middle East. With the U.S. no longer supplying weapons, Israel might secretly accelerate its nuclear program, creating a dangerous regional standoff. Iran, Saudi Arabia, and even Turkey could race to match it. The result? A Middle East trembling on the edge of total war. Cinematic description: allies turned enemies. American warships locking radars on Israeli fighters, cyber attacks plunging cities into darkness, and nuclear secrets whispered in back channels. The entire world would hold its breath, wondering if this was the spark for World War III. Now we explore possible futures. Best case scenario: reconciliation. After months of chaos, leadership changes in Washington or Tel Aviv open the door for peace. New leaders recognize the dangers of hostility and reopen dialogue. Aid resumes, but trust is forever scarred. The world breathes a sigh of relief, but the alliance is weaker than before. Worst-case scenario: proxy wars, regional collapse. The U.S. actively funds Israel's rivals, Iran, Syria, even Palestinian groups, while Israel allies itself with Russia and China. The Middle East becomes a battleground of proxy wars, with civilians paying the highest price. The fragile region collapses into a decade of chaos. Most realistic scenario: cold hostility. Rather than direct war, the U.S. simply distances itself. No more aid, no more political protection, but also no full confrontation. Israel adapts by leaning on Russia, China, and Europe. The alliance is gone, but open war never begins. Instead, a new multipolar Middle East emerges, filled with uncertainty. So what would really happen if the U.S. and Israel became enemies? The collapse of a 70-year alliance would shake the world. From sudden economic shocks to regional wars, from cyber attacks to nuclear threats, the ripple effects would touch every corner of the globe. But here's the real question: would this rivalry create opportunities for peace in the Middle East, or unleash chaos unlike anything we've ever seen? So, if America and Israel ever turned from friends to foes, would it mark the end of the old world order, or the beginning of a far more dangerous one? The answer might shape humanity's future,